동화들 엄마주 남게 다다니베 선제 탐지게 된도 또 잘라나메 바양다 보조베 선제기 구바를 보시 진내자 토바차 디에체도 담비 취해서 무세냐면 근주지 받는 리바세다 대시 셈바슈 다 강한 셈바치베 담비 취에 다 장주라면 너무 치모선다 정말라마 종가바 친구 되죠 다 장주람 지리바기 뒤낭수에 다 먼저 단인 로진 치료게 참다다 하동게 초대바 세들라 다든다 지단 람림 치모 시작 제와이나 아니 섭지 낭들 아니 같이 타만이라 랍수 세들라 아니 섭지 아니 니 뭐게 가스나 신내라 랍수당 아니 타동을 랍수스 니 해왔나니 다만서디 타동을 랍수디 나라 아니 섭지 미자와 시신으로 하동게 초대바 하동게 자비 아니 하동 군주 아니 공비 하동 주비 세스니다 섭지 나 시여바나니 다 하동게 초대바기 낭된들라야 섭지 숨체와 숨가서는 장된다 예된게 소롱에서와 나 공부를 공부치다 제수 아니 동반이게 따와 오늘 때라 밥주스는 다든다디 동반이게 따와 때라 밥주 섭지오다 디 섭지 숨면은 담아디네 독수네 다고수슈네 드스트린 소블젠디니 마고수슈인스.
Everyone, please begin by developing the motivation to listen to this Dharma teaching for the sake of all mother sentient beings who are infinite like space. And in order to benefit them, that you will attain the state of the most precious and perfect state of a Buddhahood and do whatever it takes to do so. And that's the purpose of listening to this teaching. And what is the teaching we're listening to? It is the Lamrim Chenmo written by the great Tsongkhapa Je Rinpoche, the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And so within this text, then in general, when we look at the outline, where we are is in the section about the final two paramitas, or the final two perfections. And that's meditative concentration and wisdom. And so the way that the text covers those is in the two sections of serenity, chapter on serenity, and then on insight. More than just a chapter in our translation, it's whole section. So the section on serenity and the section on insight. And so now we're in the section on insight, and that's also called Vipassana, insight. And so within that, then there are four major parts of the outline, or four major categories within the text. So there's prerequisites for meditating on insight. There's the divisions of insight, the way of meditating on insight. And then the way to understand when insight has been achieved, when it has been developed. So it's like the measure of insight is another way of saying that. So those are the four main sections. And within this first, then we have a section on the purpose of doing the insight meditation. And then we have the section on, so it's just, since people are going to be reading in the book as well, some people have it. So what I just read, okay, is right. So if you look at chapter 8, relying on definitive sources. So the first sentence says, since insight is needed. The second section concerns how to train in insight. So that's those four parts, how to train in insight. And then where we are now, so then there's also above that is the prerequisites for insight, identifying scriptures of provisional meaning and definitive meaning, the history of commentary, and Nagarjuna's intended meaning. And then where we are now, if we go down a bit, we are on the next chapter. This is chapter 9, the stages of entry into reality. So that's where we are now.
Other do che, that don't want you get della picture, says me what that tillas didn't undo the lion. Take on any that you be bad tongues, and take on any della picture, news was such a neat one. That is it, that in the dealer trading days, the cups of Shuna. 다 동반이게 따와 때라 배주 스케줄 시행도 당주 남규 동이 또 배다와 동반이 있으면 뭐지다 지 암교로 권유를 다뒤 내주 뭐지 된 스토리거다 이내 동이 또 배다와디 다 내가 지금 간전이 봐 동이 또 배다와디 하고 고위 윤센 두도지 야보징으로 하면 거기는 로젠디는 치료도 차고 뒤조인데는 용낭들이 레벨 그래 다디다 배 차고 다배 중 치우지 섬이 kinderle ni ndo zane da de deshe dinima deshe hadon chimu na da be dinima hadon chimu se da be ja ko lo su ti ba ina oda dinana be toni ta wa ta wa di shuji ke u da je ru ji wa chongol ma tongwa ba chimu dinima da tongwa ni ge ta wa di shuji 14 deshe ja go ro wa da di deshe ja be ge nang de ni cha zang lo jong chi ni kang tu de ni ma ta ba ji wa lu zen ta ba ji di dinala da 하나 좀 용토 아이나 다 딜라 때네 아니 소소로 저 고와당 야채로 동관이게 따와디 딘데션 한데 딘데션 한데 하고야 편도 치고 쉬우지 오거와 인도스네다 동관이게 따와서디 식직래 동니 따와 얘네 디 하고야들 굉장히 뭐부 쉬우지 마잖아 레로 하고 뭐 그거면서 또뭐 좀 된데기 장으로와 콜로 바위에 가서 아니 시진이 도디를 무지 세대는 배 붐이 지체적 동바스는 배 쉬우지다 제부터 붐부 중에서 왔다 kendre기다 배 송을 다 도로스드는 좀내되게 되는 최송의 강가 돈이도 배 따와 아니 기회치도 송아이 자스 친구 시발하기로 얘라 디다 탐지고 투비 셔런도 송 무슨 디네선 송아래 인도전에 다 돈이도 배 따와데 레라우징 하는주다 배sem나 샤 카보로지 요래 레라우샤 통말고 돈이세 디네레스 나와 잠기 콜라마 셈기 냠뇽돈 곰잡용도 semna shaya di kala kabu shujo ti indusani ta ti deshe jabdangdi rikpa gyunze ma uji toni di deshe gyabe gita kumulu tuki jine ta uma tsawa shira la soba tini ma pang tini ta tini kyaga pindu shung nana yang ta tini ma tongyo tumbi shung mabu shuji rwa pena tanda kumulu tuki uma rikso chuk sini rwa ta tongyo tumbi tawa di uma rikso shung min rwa chuk ze yore ti wala tini ani kasana chi tinda di 로베 상계잖아. 아니 반대 나와 잡아다 코너도 슝팡. 진이 돈이도 배 따와디 대시 쉬고 잡여. 다티 대시 잡아디 마도 스마트네 된다. 벽이다 개받는 정글로 종과 받침 추억이 있네요. 아니 자기 빈도 슝지다라 때네 좀 된데기 돈이도 배 따와디 자기 빈도 슝로 콩통이다 디니마 배 쉬고지다. 자동치 모습이다 쉬고지다 돈이 마 대시 제 슝배 세로 연하면 다 직차대로 완전 지난 제름지기 돈이 고르순이 따위 고르순이 빼점이라고 강화요래로 배나지劳动 친구劳动 중무슨 인시로 아니 엄마 공부를 없었어야다 사실 디제스야다 그리고 어떤 아니 디네션이 따가다劳动 체중이 아니 공부를 없어 아니 사실 디제 장애를 신이 무슨 다 뒤에 흉치 뭔가 되 저름지기로 동반이게 따와지 대시 숙청부 쉬우지 잡고 디나는 이제 합동 친구들이 당하는 몸기 냠래다 되니 쉬우지 답에 사고 쉬우지 송하네 무슨 당에 되니마도 무슨 기능 당하는 당보다 다루기 돈이도 따와게 로정지 고주에서 아니 뒤에 최식이 지금 되지 쉬나 상승으로 어디 되시죠.
Now we're talking about emptiness in this section. So from here on out, this is all about emptiness, emptiness, emptiness. And so this is a text where J. Rinpoche, Tsongkhapa, has explained emptiness very extensively, going into a lot of detail. And this is something that if you really are able to look over, review, and read through this material all consistently as we study it over the next period of time, and if you daily and regularly are able to read through this material, it will be extraordinarily beneficial because there's a lot here, there's a lot of detail here. So we say emptiness all the time. So emptiness is this, the wisdom realizing emptiness. We have, these phrases that we often hear and come in the Dharma texts. But, it's one word, emptiness is this one word, but it's something that you have to understand by using many, many different kinds of reasons, different sort of whole lines of logic and different approaches that you use to understand what emptiness means. And the Buddha himself, our teacher, the Buddha, he taught the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the great, the big, the great, middling, and small Prajnaparamita Sutras, and hundreds of thousands of verses. So there's altogether 12 whole volumes of this Prajnaparamita literature. So extremely extensively the Buddha himself taught about emptiness. And all of the Buddhist teachings, as Shihuala, as Shantideva wrote or said in his text, the Bodhicharyavatara, in the first section, in the introduction to the chapter on wisdom, the 9th chapter, he says that all of the teachings of the Buddha, all of the various branches or various aspects of the teaching of the Buddha were taught for the sake of this wisdom. Were taught for the sake of this perfection of wisdom. So it's not something that this emptiness is, even though it's just one word, it's not something that really easily kind of dawns in your mind. Its meaning does not easily appear clearly in your mind. It's something that takes a lot of effort, and it's something that you establish through experience, something that you have to come to an understanding of by developing your own experience of it. And again, there are many different lines of reasoning and many different kind of logical, ways of analyzing logically, giving different syllogisms and reasons to prove and understand emptiness. So there's a lot of content to be understood and go through. And so we have, again, kind of continuing to talk about the texts that go through all these reasons and explanations. We have Arya Nagarjuna, and he composed the text called the collections of the 6 texts that are the collection of reasonings, the 6 texts on reasoning. And then he had his own kind of followers. So after him, there was Buddhapalita and Chandakirti. And so all of these texts, they are again putting forth different reasons and explaining kind of in various different ways and more detail, all the different ways to understand emptiness or to prove emptiness. And then we have here Tsongkhapa's works. So that we had the Indian masters that were just mentioned, those were Indian masters, and then Tsongkhapa himself composed 5 great works on emptiness. So these are 5 great works of Tsongkhapa. So we have what we're studying now, which is known itself, even though it's part of the book, the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, this very section on emptiness is known as the Great Treatise on Insight, the Great Insight Treatise. Then he also composed the Small Insight Treatise, which is actually a section of the middle-length Lamrim on insight. Then he composed a text called and I'm sorry because it is translated now into English, just over the last year or so been published, and so I forget the exact wording and the published version, but it's something like the clarifying the intent, something like that. So that is a book that we have in English now, thanks to Geshe Jimbala. And so we have that. So that's 3, right? The Great Treatise on Insight, the Small Treatise on Insight, the Clarifying the Intent. Then we have the text called Ocean of Reasoning, also in English. And then we have a text called Distinguishing the Definitive from the Provisional, which is also known as, what's the English version there? The Essence of, the Essence of Eloquence. Okay, so now when we study these, we see that also in this text here is extremely extensive, and it's really taught through, it's explained, kind of in a way of, merging the explanations with meditation practice all the way through.
Oh yeah, that was it. That didn't matter to me. This tobachi, tekonani, yanele deba kans, te tobachi, top, tekonani la juba, chidawa shiki, gone juba inyamnas. Chidang nangi chu, nazoba, tekonani, maishidu, tekonani, nawa di tamje, pajadan jeba, never she was. 다당 다길 짐바 넘바 탐제도 세바니 디 토바치비 테코는 이게 출구서 다 도시니 다든다 디나라 다지다 가서도 직직 마신 라뷰라 차이는 다든다 디 바로 기들어 좀 뭐지 고네 이제 말 라뷰제 그리고 다든다 디가서 테코는 이라 주고 짐바 세디기 삼로 당연히 테코는 이디 가르레스 테라 주고 짐바디 가르레스 계제 남도니 제시자 뭐 서브젝트 통보들라고 다 테코는 이디 아니 톱적이 테코는 이당 곰적이 테코는 니나샤니로 다 된다 디가서 아니 가서는 톱적이로 테코는 이디 마트시 잡는데 아니 테 토바치비로 와디도 딜 토바치비 테코는 니냥을 대바 강인 세기 지와 당들에서 와 니바들아 테 토바치비 탑 테코는 니는 주고 진짜 인습니다 테코는 니다 니샤들과 아니 디비값도 아니 추구 아니 디신이 아니 gon lamgi kapsu gomjegi tini tishin nile고다 디게 나네다 데뷔 kapsu 토바치비 추구 디신이 뭐 쳐봐이나 아니 디라 디 톱제들라 아니 람기 kap이 대코는 일이 예발 곰고바들 랑신기 하고 그거에서 디치도 되니 톱제 대코는 일이 못 주시니 다디 톱제 대코는 일이 간데서 못 주시도스나 다 토바치비 탑 대코는 일을 주고 제군 중에는 치당 난게 춘 나조고 대코나 마인시도 대코는 나와 디 탐제스 다 치당 난게 주스나 다음으로 추 답변 시주비 추이나 말아도 다낭 강사기 규기 뒤비 추지당 규기 마두비다 치료기 되니 최니리고 다 치드니 수다 제를 다 치기 최당 아니 나라도 낭시 강사기 규기 되니 미소 옹봉을 쏘바다 싶더라 다른 강사기 규기 뒤비 최당 어디 기비 시주기 뒤비 최당 낭기 최다 기비 시주기 마두비 치료기 되니 최 가서나 뒤라 치기 최 뒤조 강가 태권은 시로 신도 태권은 나와 뒤탐지 가져다 태권은 수도 다 랑신이 주바 많이 발라 랑신 주바 나오면 나와지 랑신 주바 짐바 니레고 다 랑신 주바 짐바 당 나와 니가 파저도 안 제바더니 배 니부터 비더니 니월 시와 디 시와 디당 아니 딘데 왜 나와 디기 딘제기다 다당 다길 짐비더니 딘징 다 대다 나바 탐주도 세바디 추구 디신이제 세대다 산제 법규 고된디로와 방바 디신이 산제 법규 당하라서 톱적이로와 추구 dim니 파자다 지금 방바디 간대지에 나와 있는 당 모디 동바디 랑신 임발라 티디 애니 가스나 랑신이 간대신에 레바레스나 친한게 최 나바 나서 아니 덴바투 밤랑신 투바 많이 발라 텐나위 티니 나와티당 나와 시집 나와디 계지기 파자당 아니 딘데 왜 나와 주부 많이 봤더니 딘데 왜 대바나 주바징이 짐바다 제바 아니 대수 니부터 그 대수도 제비 차디라 아니 산지 밥이 규규티니 가르스나 아니 갈라오래 고대 빵바 야나 최고 습갑듯이 최고디 다 산지 밥이 규기 다 그나서다 디니 파자다 제바 빵비 빵바 타둑 오다 딘데 왜 빵바디 갑디 디니 가르 토바치비 대코는 이레스 와다 또된다 디갑수 서브젝트 함비 대코는이 세들니 대시 잡니레서와 오다 딘데지 추구도 대시 잡고도스
So now we'll begin reading from not quite where we left off. We're going to go back up, so just starting right from the start of chapter 9 there. So again, just reading the outline, how to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. That's section 3. This has two parts, the stages of entry into reality and the actual determination of reality. So section A, the stages of entry into reality. So we will just read the first couple paragraphs. Nirvana is the reality one seeks to attain, but what is nirvana? If entry into reality means a method for attaining it, then how do you enter? Reply, the reality that you seek to attain, the embodiment of truth, is the total extinction of conceptions of both the self and that which belongs to the self, specifically by stopping all the various internal and external phenomena from appearing as though they were reality itself, which they are not, along with the latent predispositions for such false appearances. So then here we can take a look and we see that the question that we're looking at is first of all, what is entering, we're talking about the stages of entry into reality. So what is reality and what are the stages of entering into it? How is reality entered into? And then here we have this reality is, the reality that you seek to attain. So we actually are able to see that the text here is making a distinction in two types of reality. There's the reality which is something that you seek to attain. It's an object of attainment, or an object, basically our aim, we can just call it simply enough. So the reality which is our aim, or something we wish to attain. And then there's also the reality which is on the level or the stage of the path, which is the object that we meditate upon. So there's the object that we seek to attain. Using this word object, that kind of directly equates with a Tibetan term. You can say the object that you seek to attain, and there's also the object that you seek, the object on which you meditate in terms of reality. So reality, which is one that you seek to attain, and reality, one that you meditate upon. Okay, so that's what's happening in this paragraph. The embodiment of truth here is actually the Dharmakaya. That's just a translation of the phrase Dharmakaya, which some people may be familiar with. So we're talking here about the Dharmakaya, the truth body of the Buddha. So that's the result that's attained. And so that's, and so then there's, okay, good. And so that's one kind of reality. And then there's the reality of the result and the reality of the path. Okay. Okay, so now we have this discussion about what that is, the total extinction of conceptions of both self, that which belongs to the self, specifically by stopping all various internal and external phenomena and so forth. So the internal and external phenomena here. So here what we're talking about is stopping the obstructions to omniscience, which are also called the cognitive obscurations, right? The obscurations to omniscience, or obscurations to knowledge, they're sometimes called. So that's what is being talked about here. And when it says the inner and internal and external phenomena, that is referring to, the internal phenomena, all those phenomena which are within the continuum, or are part of, they're within the continuum of a person or being, within the consciousness continuum of a person or being. And external phenomena are those phenomena which are they're not included within the continuum of beings. Those are the external phenomena. So all these phenomena are, as it says here, they appear as they were reality itself, yet they are not. So what's happening here is appearing as reality means they appear to be established within nature, or appear to be established inherently. And they're grasped at in that way. So there's the appearance, and there's also a grasping at them as existing, all internal and external phenomena, as though they were naturally established, inherently established within nature. And so this reality then is the complete and utter pacification of that appearance and grasping. And so that's another way of describing that, is by saying it's the self and that which belongs to the self, the conceptions of self and that which belongs to the self. So that has to be completely and utterly pacified. And so another way of saying that is that this is the wisdom body of the Buddha, the Arya Buddha, the wisdom body of the Arya Buddha. And so that's the result, right? And again, this is another way of saying this is that it is the abandonment which has abandoned, which it is the final or ultimate abandonment which has abandoned the two obscurations together with their imprints. So as it says, along with the latent predispositions, so predispositions or imprints. So this is that final ultimate abandonment that is this result that we're seeking to attain, the reality that is we seek to attain. And so again, it's when we say the appearance is false appearances, the appearances are the obscurations to omniscience. And then they also, are what, are these latencies or imprints that make the other obscurations arise. They are causes that make other obscurations arise. And so this again is the Dharmakaya, the truth body of the Buddha.
태코는이도 넘어 뒤탐지 바저다 제바 네와시와 시레니리도 인도산이 다다당 다기와 짐바 넘바 탐주도 세바 세기 등 다당 다기와 짐바스나 컨디지를 쓰고레스 와 태코는 넘어 세디 컨디지를 쓰고레스 다 묘주다 시르니 컨디시리고 다당 다기와 짐바스도 다도 짐바 당신 당랑주 귤라 당랑주 뜻인지 당랑주 강가 최고 토마토와 디가스는 당랑주 귤라 아니 가스는 다당 다기와 짐바 아니 배 누무바 슈자지요바 티요바 좀 말했어 티네 틴데 다당 다기와 짐바 디기 또기 아니 유 컨디지를 때나요 아니 다도 주바스나다 루이온기 파 다자 많이 봐 유유기 티네 투모만 들어오는 주바 랑싱기 주바와 틴데지 넘와들라 아니 시티 왔다 틴데와기 넘와디 디다 넘와디 요바 주부 말 넘와디 박자 쓰다 말랑조다 디가수다 디바민다와 카숨되요도와 다당다게 왔으면 당신 직체 아니 대코는 넘와 직체 대다기 박자서 다들라도 다당다게 왔으면 지바디 로지래 다 말서 로 춘한지 그와 당랑 가사줄라 아니 다가 세계에서는 가 바랑싱 두바지 미지바 아니 나이와 스네르와다 나이 풍보다 들도라 미네랑 시두바지 미지바지 대치봉 해 봐가다 나이와 많이 비트네 최 탐제라랑 시두바 나와 딘데 웬나와디 아니 로이도 웬나게 로 춘나지 다 딩게와게 개와 통합해 봐는 된다 보도 말한 줄 딘데 진진진 또기 아니 나위 박자디 무튼 유한상 최고 동관이디 최고 디신이 통투고 말인자 최고 디신이 세디 딘데 외로와 아니 다당 다기와 짐바스디 아니 가스나 직다 강사게 당신당 아니 최고 당신이 당 디기 또기 나위랑 신주가 나와 당 대다 계시기 때문에 박자다 제바 세비차네 아니 가스나 최고 대신이 있습니다. 상직이다 된다 방바 탈도디 보다 용단데 딘데기 뒤쪽 강가 파 장리 용화建议上 디가수 종제디라 다 아니 동료도 비시라면은 담비 대신 니뭐 관계자 시투고 말해. 이들선이다 동관이 따와디 마텔라 배구 윤센디 말한수 그 다다다게 왔지 바다 대단능 윤능과 추능 나조주여서 오다 딘데왜 추능디 녀와시나 추구토고래 녀와 마시나 추구토고 말해 오다 딘데와디 녀와시와라 동관이 따와디랑신 고구여서 아니 진다 가스나 토바체비 추구 디신이 스니다 모두 지구 군세 딘데지 강리도
So gonna saying I thought to explain this again in a little bit different way and say something else about it. So in this paragraph, we are really getting at three different things that are involved. So there's the conceptions of self and that which belongs to self, which is another way of saying, another way we can say that is the self-grasping and grasping at mind, right? Mind grasping and self-grasping. And then the second part is this reality, right? What is the reality? And then we also are talking about the latent predispositions for these false appearances. And so really this is getting into a discussion of a difference between the afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations and the relation between them. So we have self-grasping, and that really is talking about any kind of object whatsoever that we observe or kind of have as a focus, and we apprehend it as being, we grasp it as being or conceive of it as being, not merely labeled by the mind out there, but instead by existing or being established from its own side, from its own nature, from its own side. So that's a grasping that we have. That's called self-grasping. It could be for any phenomena. So that's why we have grasping the self of persons and grasping the self of phenomena as well. So really looking at what the self-grasping, we have grasping the self. We can say this, grasping at me, grasping at I, the thought of I. So we have all these different conceptions of I, grasping at, the self-grasping of persons. We have, when we look at the aggregates, and then we are, observing the aggregates, and we give rise to this grasping at mine and I in regards to the aggregates. It's also self-grasping. And then looking at any kind of phenomena, any phenomena whatsoever, observing it or putting your mind toward, pointing your mind towards any phenomena and then grasping that phenomena, in this way, with self-grasping, that's all self-grasping. So, but some of self-grasping of persons, and then there's also self-grasping of phenomena. And so then by doing that, we've been doing that. We've had those kinds of minds of grasping, self-grasping since beginningless births all the way up till now. So since time immemorial, since beginningless stream of births, that habit of grasping things as existing from their own side, of self-grasping is in the mind. And so that makes it so that we're not able to achieve this dharmakaya, this reality that we seek to attain, or the embodiment of truth, the truth body. So we're not able to achieve the truth body because we have this habit of grasping things, self-grasping. And then this, so this kind of sort of stages of how these things are related, how do they interact, the grasping, and then there's also the appearance of things from their own side, grasping of things from their own side, the appearance of things from their own side. Again, as it says, internal and external phenomena appear as though they were reality, which they are not. So again, appearing as though they were reality is meaning they appear to exist from their own side, to exist within nature, but they do not exist that way. So that so the grasping, self-grasping, that gives rise to the appearance of things as being reality. Then that appearance is what gives rise to the imprints or tendencies. So then what we come to is I'm sorry, it doesn't give rise to that appearance leaves the imprint or tendencies for the okay, so that sorry, just the difference of the word from arise, it gives rise to just to that it leaves or puts down the imprints for the these the imprints of the grasping and the appearance. Okay, so what this comes down to is to say that this is the purpose, the need for meditation on emptiness, for realizing emptiness, because without the wisdom realizing emptiness, then there's no way we can pacify all of this self-grasping and the appearance, the imprints left by the appearance. So these are all, when we talk about self-grasping and these appearances, those are all like hallucinations, basically. They're, another way to say that is they're mistaken appearances. They're mistaken appearances. I guess loosely translated, you could say hallucination, but maybe it's too strong. So they're mistaken appearances. So we have to completely and utterly pacify these mistaken appearances. And the only way to do that is through the wisdom realizing emptiness.
대코는이나 치다 주비제바니 통보 쿠에 니균 삼네 이순데 텔라 도도 깨바시 그 스타든다디 대코는이 추구 디신이와 추구 디신이 디톱지기 대코는이 돈이 도비 람기지바 오다 텔라 주비제바들라 아니 간대지 그거를 나 팀이 바자다 제바 방비 추구 디신이 다기 콘도 추구를 송소와 추구되다 대톱지기 타 아니 대코는 또 비시라로 주비 리바디 다 삼모도 스니마 하는 거랑 주다 고민 잡으는데 다 당부 삼모 가르고 그래. 스르와 돈유도 따와디 밖에 믹사디 추구 디신이 톱지 제도 돈유도 따와디 공거래. 돈유도 따와디라 하더니 로장에는 리바 가르스 줘거래. 스나 당부 코비 니준 삼니스 다 코와기로 왔다 동행이 니수도 삼에들 왔다 동행 셰바차 군중방바차 스니다 송하나신 당부 동행이 니수 셰디 당부 코위 니교 삼니 코위 교회 가르르스나 코와 지 교회다 코와 제작이 교회도 삼노당인데 코와 지 삼노당은 레다 니몬기 라와메바 다토 베 코인네 가르지 깨나요 레다 니몬기 라와메바 베 아니 가서 동안 나반나서 중요하게 실을 대민도 무슨 코와 지기 다 코와 지라라서 못 당하나 다 도와주고 있으면 배나 냐위 동에서 못 당해 이다 아니 당하지 튼도 아니 미 하선다 도와주고 좋아 소소소소 아니 배 동에 뒤나네 배나 미라이나 기회이 내가서 동안 가져온 거래 아니 안 나위 내가서 경고 체위 내가서 치위 내가서 다 동에 뒤단 뒤답이 당하나서 늘 배는 zambuling 디나라이네다 막 두기 있더니 배 근데 내양부도 다 동에 나반나서 용의 강가 그런 줄라다 아 미드베다 소소 되바면에 용의 긴 강가디 소소기다 스템 나한테 배 수능 계지보다 뒤 된도 매워 마소나 답에 양의 양도 용해지 견지래샤 삼리 딘디기 다 쿠기다 개간나지 동안에 쏘바다 지 누기 지den기 때 동안에 답변을 하면서 누기 지den을 때네 마두라 쏘바 네암라 쏘바 딘디기 때네 동안에서 동안 나반나서 지 알아서 루비땡도야 루마 게저에 아니 루 나야라 쏘바 전 타마 치에라 쏘바 딘디기다 두조 강가 다 알아서 되게 말때 연구 다디 동해기 랑신 바디 시부고네 아니 telha thordogi logic thabu keba chigore ta tongni to biro jang ba tongni to be de tawa zinawa tipki mai bache tongni to be tawati ani 가리기 chedu sinata dungen naba nazo ji meba söegi chedu tabde ta dungen naba nazo ji sem nala du sini koni ani ku thangbo tinjegi dini 가스나 dungen naba nazo tindola dini thordogi lo keba chi gogore shiba thangbo di sundu usti.
So we'll read the next sentence. The stages by which you enter that reality are as follows. First, having contemplated in dismay the faults and disadvantages of cyclic existence, you should develop a wish to be done with it. Okay, so that was the only line that was read here. So then when we're now looking at emptiness and the practice of, or the path of, or the desire to realize emptiness, then first, where do we turn our thoughts? What is the first object of reflection and contemplation for us? Well, first we're looking at like the stages of getting to the realization of emptiness, the practice of emptiness. So the first step of that, the first stage, is to understand suffering, the suffering of samsara and the faults of samsara. So as it says here, having contemplated in dismay the faults and disadvantages of cyclic existence. So cyclic existence is another word for samsara, which is korwa in Tibetan. And so there's ways we can think about, many different ways we can think about the disadvantages of samsara and suffering. There's a sort of general way that is applicable to all of samsara, and then there's specific ways to various places, various existences within samsara. So the general kind of overarching problem is that we are under the control of karma and afflictions. We're not free from the influence of karma and afflictions, so we have no true freedom. Okay, so that's the general fault of samsara. Then when we look at the specific faults of the various existences, well, that's the discussion about the 6 classes of samsara, the hell realms, hungry ghost realms, animal realm, human realm, demigod and god realms. And then each of those have their own, varieties of multitudes of suffering, different kinds of sufferings. So we can look to the human realm, where we have familiarity with the human sufferings in the human realm. So right now there's the problem of pandemic, problem of illness and pandemic. There's suffering from war. Then basically anything which is not desired yet happens anyway. Anything that we don't want but comes our way, that is suffering that we experience. So problems with samsara, faults with samsara. So we have to look at that honestly and then generate this kind of dismay. We could call it a dismay is a fine word, kind of being tired of it, being bothered by it, not wanting to involve ourselves with it anymore. And that comes again when we are thinking of, broadly about all these different problems. So in the human realm, we have just by the fact of, having this world, we have different problems that come together with it. By the fact of having a body, so we have the container of the world, and then the beings, in the world. So being a being with this body gives us problems. So we have the problem of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Again, especially, sickness gives big suffering, aging brings a lot of suffering, and then finally death. So all those are our problems or faults with the body. And so we also, so then when we are thinking about, thinking about your kind of path to realizing emptiness, what are the stages of that path, then it all should be done kind of within this context of, well, the whole point, what is the point of meditating on emptiness? It's to finally train in that so that you can abandon this suffering, so that you can pacify all the sufferings, to remove the suffering that we meditate on emptiness. That's all.
베티 동안에다 전에 찌마로 섬내와 라니다 심지 탐제 동안 타다다 전에 찌마로 동에들었다 되게 거의 동에 쉬고 뒤 동에 나반나서 조액이 동에한테 두디 되는 매와 마수나 그런 동에게 뭐디 매와 소퇴면 이제 전에 주 말로는 믿어봐 토네 아니 그주 가리래서나 주 짜와디 받제는데 아니 가리래 직담 마리바스 다 직다 나스는 나 랑신 두바 소소다 소소소라 나라 미네 랑신 두바 짐바가라 미제 모레라 텐데지 레고 디라 직다 야나 마리바 와 당진 마리바 오다 텐데베 당진 직다 디부터니 마란주다 고와라다 데다 ngawang 라와미 계획이 아니 좋았음제 탐제 계획이 짜와디 지도 그래다 소소소 아니 동에 나반나서 용의 규디 소소소소 비디니 가리레스나 아니 직다 마리바 당진이 또기 아니 착소 유무가 나서지게 유무가 되게 되는 내산인데 동안 나반나서 용해지 중무도 인도전에 다 자와 당진 직다 마리바데 매와 마서나 탑 민투 삼리 삼노동인데 되니 교봉도의 삼노데 아니 디제라더니 삼노데 코트가 소거레스 빼나가는 신동을 빼자가고 신동기 되니베 야가를 또 같은 게 피고 말 신동도 매와 소거는 신동 자와니 매와 마서나 거의 야가를 또는 거랑 신경 제일 깨운 거 와인도 저는 자와디 매와 소가 나신 말아서 동안 나반나서 용이 자와디 가리도 받제지 전에 삼목 땅도다 개방마다 고마기다 때문에 너무 주고 말 삼로라 말아서 동안 나바 있는 소소기 대 나반나서 내 나반나서 지역이 깨는데 미시부 뭐바 당진기 또기 아니 제와디 인상다 당진기 뽕는 마도 직선 말해 삼로디다 티지로 딘지기 계획이 삼로지 딘지 땅거래 티 뽕도기 좀 많이 맛있게 마시고 스님아 딘지를 샤스.
Okay, so we'll read the next sentence. Then, understanding that you will not overcome it unless you overcome its cause, you research its roots, considering what might be the root cause of cyclic existence. You will thereby become certain from the depths of your heart that the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, or ignorance, acts as the root of cyclic existence. So you've gone through the first stage, and you're thinking about all these different varieties of suffering, this huge collection of of various multitudes of suffering, developing that wish that you must be free from it. How wonderful would it be? How necessary is it for myself and all beings to be free, all living beings to be free from this suffering? And then you have to look, well, how do you get rid of something in general, right? You have to get rid of something, to abandon something or eliminate it, you have to eliminate the cause of it. So you have to find, what is this root? Like it says here, if understanding, you will not overcome it unless you overcome its cause. So to overcome or to reverse it or remove it, you have to remove the cause. So then what is that cause? You research it, you become certain from the depths of your heart that the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, or ignorance, self-grasping ignorance specifically. So we can say self-grasping ignorance or the reifying view of the perishing aggregates. The reifying view of the perishing aggregates, meaning this thought or sense of me, I. So it's observing or pointing your mind towards I, and then grasping it as existing inherently. So that suffering then is seen to be coming, right, from the cause of this ignorance and view of the the reifying view of the perishing aggregates. And that itself, that ignorance itself, gives rise to attachment and all the other afflictions that come. And then those give rise to karma, the huge varieties of actions that we do. So then we see how when we can understand this better by using an analogy, and a simple analogy, which is just looking at when you want to remove a tree. If you want to kill a tree or remove a tree, if you just go and chop off every branch individually, then you won't actually kill the tree that way. So the only way to really truly kill the tree is to eliminate it from its roots. You have to take it from the roots of the tree. And so here we can think about the suffering we have as the result of the karma that we've accumulated, the actions we've done. But that itself comes from this ignorance, which is a not understanding things, an ignorance which is a not knowing, an unknowing ignorance. And so we have to abandon, again, we have to see that if we don't abandon that, then there's nothing else, how to say it? Without abandoning that, there's no possible chance. So.
다 되네 직다 동바 대수미 담에 또 비셔럽 개발을 알아봐 통네 다데 가고 봐 통데스 다데 여발라 뉴제다 메비 두실 운다시 발라 때네 예바시 타바 균도 니나 메비 탑메도 스타도 신마 소는데 다 도탑디다 다기 리가스나 동해게 규디 오저체 동해 하고니 동해디 라닝고 답에 테너지 마로 삼메도 동해게 규디라 삼다니 규디 메와 마소나 아니 제부 동해디 메와 조에면도 다 규디 메와 소고이나 다 가릴라 떼오래스나 다 규지다 엔다디 가나주다 동해 나반나조 용해기 규디 쪼디 지다 마리바 다 지다 마리바디 라틴 메와 소야라 가리고도스나 다 당메도 비셔 맨날 메도 선들와 다 직다디라 당메도 비셔라 맨날은 직다디 시디 가스나 나 랑신 주바 징긴 진바디라 직다세 바르와 다 나 랑신 주바 징겐기로 추난디 메와 소야라 나 랑신 마주바 하고 고겐기 돈유도 비셔라지 니에바도 고도 시디다 돈유도 비셔라디 아니 가스나 켈치무 이바디 다 소소 동면 넘바 나소지 메와 소야라 동해디 계획이 그 자와 직다라라리 직다디 메바 쇠와라 아니 직다라 그 통행이 동료도 비셔라 아니 네버도 마지는 조선명이지 오다티 라레바디 하고와지 거레스 통이 다디 통이스 다가스나 직다디기 동해 나반나소디 계획이 성당인데 아니 가서는 방자 코와 junji기로 동해 대바도 군중의 jun제디 아니 게제디 레와리 다티 공지게 되니 람 남에 또비 셰랍 동에 또비 셰랍디 톡고바 수디 아니 가리래 다 디바루라 디빵 비빵다 고데 디가스나 동행 넘바 나서 깨와 지경이 지다디 메바 쳔미 차디 톡고이나 당면 또비 셰랍 람디 네바도 공고도 세 단다 당면도 동료도 불러디 공고도 섬이 삼모도 장신이 레빈 거 다디 레와라 가리고도스는 동행당 동행의 규디 아니 이제 그래서 동행 뒤 넘바 나서 용해디 규 직다기 말이 보고게 중샤 스니다 뒤체인데 가리섬 땅을다 레 군제라디 이제 때문에 가지고 왔다 레 동행 넘바 나서 용할라 용해디 끼엔디 규 미게와 뒤한티 용해 자와디 직다 어 딘데기다 넘바 나서를 기가 때네 동행 넘바 나서 용도 삼빌로디기다 kumti tembala ta namju ma sonen tende la chuni ki ro tende la chuni ro dang di ma ya bu ji ta ngana zo namju jang zo ta ki bu ting ka do sa ro ti ka do la ta tende la chuni mo de nang yo re indu zen tende la chuni ki sam mo do so ne an sam tang wa na ani 방자 코와 junde 스디로 왔다 동해다 동해의 규디 아니 중심들 이전이인데 동해의 규 용기 자와 당매도비 자와 당진되게 시험이 봐 동네 당매도비 시라데 장신이 다 공고와들라 말아서 또나다 대바디 슈치를 두고 와 대발라고 그래 이제디 슈치를 두고 어다 근데 가고 통 다데 여발라다 간데스네 다 뒷돈 당매도비 시라데 간데스네 다 직다기 되는 랑신 두바 짐바 낭신 민두 삼베드니 아니 가스나 메베드니 가스나 두체 롱다시 바 가리도스 코 유난 꽤 가리도스 어떤 롱다시 바게 된 두체디 삼로 땅고리다 디니마데 슝모 지게부 슈주 용고 준진 디차와다 따와 코비 자와 동행 나반나조고 용행기 자와 직다 디디니 시유로 추바디 추바 레샤스 가즈나 코기 심바낭신 민두 삼베드니 아니 가스나 롱다 직바게 된 국제디 하고에 디 유나 교인들이 도 스네드 뉴체 보다 디 하고발라 때네 아니 당면도 비셔럽디 네바도 땡고도 세기 네바 때문에 와이나 되니 랑신게 되네 가스나 나서 타바 되니기 삼모디 아니 기나다 슈자야지래 왔다 근데 디카도를 남는 친구들이 디카도 책대양 오늘이고 온도시네로와 타바 되니기로 깨발라 당면도 왜 따와디 맨날 지금 말이 세대한테 온분이 시작하시네로와 지당 타바 되니기로 깨발라 동료도 왜 따와디 고고 말이 이내 온분이 두족이 아니 가서는 타바 된도니와 세대 다지 곧 니고 말 타바 된도니와라 강례 디 강스는 텐데 탈바디 당부 모주 도움도 탈바디 체면이네 티니 신이 탈바 된도니고 오늘 디안 온분이 남기지 보듯이 순거리와 인다데도와 네바식 타바 된도니나 매비 탑매도 쓰다 타바 된도니별로 깨와라 동료도 따와디 네바지 고래 세대 온분이 볼라체 지당 아니 가스나 탈바 되니기 루이 삼베 장내 아니 가스나 딘데 베드네 동료도 따와디 메나 지다 도 투고 말해 쓰디다 오분도 니가라고 그래서 디원도 신이 되시 디자게 고스
You then need to develop a sincere wish to eliminate that. Next, see that overcoming the reifying view of perishing aggregates depends upon developing the wisdom that knows that the self, as thus conceived, does not exist. You will then see that you have to refute that self. Be certain in that refutation, relying upon scriptures and lines of reasoning that contradict its existence and prove its non-existence. This is an indispensable technique for anyone who seeks liberation. So we've now been introduced, we in the stages outlined here. First, you get a good introduction to suffering, what that is, and the cause of suffering. You develop an understanding of those. And then you realize that in order to eliminate and get rid of this suffering, you need to eliminate the cause of suffering. And so you see that, you look for that root and see that it's this reifying view of the perishing aggregates. And so that's what you have to destroy or get rid of. So you have to get rid of the reifying view of the perishing aggregates. To do that, then you have to give rise to the wisdom. You have to develop the wisdom which realizes selflessness. Again, this view of the perishing aggregates here is talking about a mindset or a mental condition or state, which is, it's a mind, which is pointed towards oneself, towards the I, looking at the I, and grasping the I as being established within nature, being inherently established. So it's a false, mistaken appearance. It's a mistaken mind. And so then you come to this recognition, develop this understanding that without realizing emptiness, without realizing that the object of this grasping myself to exist inherently doesn't exist, without realizing that the way that this mind is grasping isn't the way things are in reality. Without realizing that, again, that's the wisdom realizing emptiness that is, without realizing that, then there's no other path. There's no other possible kind of approach or solution that could overcome the root cause of this suffering that we want to eliminate. And so when we talk about here the cause of suffering and suffering, that's talking about the truth of suffering and the truth of its origin, And then we talk about the now this object of attainment, this dharmakaya, that is the final abandonment that we're trying to attain. That's now a discussion about the truth of cessation, right? This is true cessation. And then the path or methods of obtaining that is the path, the true path, right? That's what allows us to achieve the result that we want. So that's like the four truths here. And so again, we see that the suffering is rooted here in ignorance, that grasps, self-grasping ignorance. And then, part of this is where it says, okay, it actually doesn't have it here directly, but right. So it says the line that I kind of just talked about it without reading the line again, but it says, so overcoming that view depends upon developing the wisdom that knows that the self, as thus conceived, does not exist. So then you develop this wisdom that sees that the way that the mind grasps at the self, it doesn't exist that way. And then part of this is also developing a very strong faith in the reality of action having results, right? The cause and effect nature of our actions and karma, or actions also known as karma. So we have to have a very strong faith in that and see that the cause of suffering is the non-virtuous action, the non-virtuous paths of action. This is covered more extensively, the way karma relates in here, in the explanation about the 12 links of dependent origination. And so the 12 links of dependent origination were already explained and taught during the section in the middle, what's it called? The practitioners' beings of middling capacity. Sorry, so the section of this text, which is called the stages of practice in common with the beings of middling capacity, that's where the extensive explanation about the 12 links came. And so then again, there we have this, understanding about the cause of samsara and the cause of cycling through samsara, and then, the final goal of abandoning, so the thing to be abandoned is samsara, and the way it's abandoned by removing the root, this ignorance that was already discussed in the earlier section. So then when we understand kind of all of that, and we have a kind of thorough understanding, then it naturally gives rise to a deep interest and inspiration to then continue learning and to continue developing this wisdom of emptiness, to really practicing it. And you could call it a faith or a confidence, conviction that will naturally arise. And it grows stronger and stronger as you understand more about this process of how suffering arises and how it's eliminated. And so we continue learning by relying on scripture, by relying on texts and teachings, as well as relying on reasoning. So we use our the reasons that are provided, and then process it through our own reasoning. And so then we're able to see how all these. So then we're able to see more clearly that we're able to see with certainty that really this kind of ignorance and what it creates is problematic. This is specifically what the problem is with it. You're able to see, okay, this is the issue. This is the problem with having the self-grasping. This is why the self-grasping is a mistaken appearance, why it is a mistaken mind. And you're able to understand very clearly and precisely the faults of it, the way it's mistaken. And so when we're talking about how it says on this line, this is an indispensable technique for anyone who seeks liberation. So here, what we're talking about is, in a sense, really that to even develop fully the renunciation, the wish to be free from samsara, then you have to have this understanding of emptiness already, because you're understanding the root samsara being the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, and then seeing that is mistaken. So you're already realizing emptiness. And now when Tsongkhapa talks about it in this way, that's in terms of the sharp capacity practitioners or students. So there's kind of the sharper capacity or sharper faculties is the phrase used. So the sharp faculty students, they're the ones who develop the wisdom realizing emptiness first, and then kind of develop renunciation or the wish to be free from samsara. But in general, it doesn't have to be in that order. So there can be other practitioners who first develop the wish to be free from samsara and then develop the wisdom realizing emptiness. But either way, for everyone, it is the case that
돈이 따와 예바식 면에 타바 돈이 예발 메타메스 식노스네디 타바 돈이 로케발 돈이도 공도 저거래서 송도가 어디 공부는 병도신 송아래 지당 공부는 뭐 이발 타바 돈이 로케발 돈이도 공도 저거 말이스
타마타마 찍는 지금 네가 이내양
네가 오늘은 네가 타바 돈이 로케네 아니 돈이도 따와 초와디 요래스 이네 다 타바 돈이 로디 따와 처차리 제라양 리고리 니라양 리고 왔다 니라 타바 돈이 로 니라 게니 돈이도 따와 제라 속인데 공부는 보시나 공부도 타바 돈이 로 니라 게니 돈이도 따와 제라 속인데 어디.
So it's just that for both types of person, both the desire to be free from samsara. I'm sorry, the phrasing is there's a phrase that's a little stronger than just desire, but anyway, something like that. Being a seeker of liberation. So becoming a seeker of liberation, and then realizing emptiness, the view of emptiness. So both the sharper and duller faculty people do both of them. It's just a matter of the order. So those who first develop the view realizing emptiness and then become a seeker of liberation, that's the sharp faculty. And then those who first develop this seeking of liberation and then develop the view of emptiness, those are the duller faculty.
어두지 다 되어들라 대들 다등 다기와라 랑싱이 중세자 매바 예배 따와 니에 뒤 광바 제변의 추구 토바 주가 있는 스타디 다 다기디다 갈라래 돈유도 베따와 줄라 제발라 담부 동에 토티 동에게 육군중 봉대 어떤 뒤 중원을 때니 아니 군중 본도 끼는데 돈도 따와디 아니 소와 치기래 스케지 시는데 다 돈도 따와디 소와이나 딱마 간데스 가그랬으나 다당 다기 와랑신 두바 중세점 해 봐오다 다당 다기 와랑신 두바 중세점 민도 사와디 돈도 로이도기 다당 다기 와랑신 두바다 다스나 나체나 안 다기 와스는 게 롱제자 풍부 소소 풍부열과 어다 풍부 소소 롱제자 강가 다 나당 나이 롱제자 강가 장신 중세장 민도 스미 삼모 코와디 가리기 또 그랬으나 다 돈도 따와디기 와다 동반니 또 따와디 요와이나 아니 나당 나이 롱제자다 강가 장신기 두바 중세장 민도 또배 팔다 좀 레샤 스미 삼모 기도 디게나 다 가리래 그래 아니 나다 나이 와랑시 두바지 미침바디 가루 디 강나 가려운 거래 아니 디라티네 중 동에 나바 나소디랑 신가와 다 디체인데 다 다당 다게 와랑시 두바 중스제 메비로디 곰곰곰곰 통보 퇴중기 삼모당 퇴중기야 흉로 뛰는 퇴바치 디지라다 삼중기 양년도 삼삼삼지바야다 데네야도 곰중곰이다 디 타르야 가을리고스나 어다 동에 두당 제바 때문에도 침비 추구더니 토바주가 되고다 뒤 돈이도 따와되게 또그 재활해 심르제디 송도와 뒤 체인데다 가리래 텐데 에라주니디 에라도 마리바 가비도기 니바 뒤실래가 딜라데네 수바 남셰가 시바 민수 같은 두 텐데 에라주니 나마나마 가바라데네 치마 가바디 돈이도 따위 또 비체와 다 치마 용화디 아니 돈이 텐데 에라주니 루아 치마 동행 나반나줘도 균디 아니 텐데라 텐 용구와 인상 다 디게 셰비 또기 다 텐데비 동행 두당 제가 매바 좋아라 돈이도 비셔라도 고도 섬비상도 코와라 다 동행 방자 균데로 왔다 동행다 동행이 균디 아니 지금 예바디게 삼으로 예바로라 깨는데 아니 텐데라 주니게 되네 루중게 바디 삼코고 디코와라 때는 아니 렌데라 이제디니 다 디루도 응아망아마다 돈유도 따와디 코니 또기 아니 때데라 주니 응아망아마라 때는 치마치마 가바라 때는 치마마 가루도 섬섬을리는데 돈유도 따와디기 그러니 고알리는 거다 디데라 주니 무도 쓰다라 이제 다 도르소도나 돈유도 따와디 아니 마 공발라 때네 람곰곰곰 마신도 기네더니 자기 공도 치고 아니 가리래 다당 다기 왔지 미진바당 아니 다당 다기 왔는 웬나와 파자다 제바 매바치 치고 이래서다 뒤토베디 아니 제데 가와 제시했으나 다 돈이도 비셔라 세대보다 개치고 이바디다 근데 되는 소도
So after you have thus arrived at the philosophical view that discerns that the self and that which belongs to the self lack even a shred of intrinsic nature, you should accustom yourself to that. This will lead to the attainment of the embodiment of truth. So then we're developing, someone wants to develop this view of emptiness. And again, seeing the need for the view of emptiness is because there's the desire to abandon suffering and its cause. So the way that you come to abandon it is to see that this self and that which belongs to the self and the mind, that they don't exist whatsoever. That this way of, first of all, the self being me, and then that which belongs to the self being mine is anything that's experienced or enjoyed or used by me. So those things are being, grasped as if they exist from their own side. And so then this view of emptiness is seeing, is realizing that there's nothing, no I or mine that exists from its own side whatsoever. Nothing whatsoever like that. So that's the view of emptiness, is realizing that. And so there's nothing whatsoever. The view of emptiness realizes that there's nothing whatsoever that is not just being merely labeled out there, being merely designated out there by the conceptual mind. There's nothing that is not like that. So okay, that's double negative. I think it's clear though. Okay. So then the process for doing this comes in this three-part process where there's first a lot of study and what's called the wisdom arising from hearing, and then a wisdom arisen from contemplation, and then wisdom arisen from meditation. And another way of saying this is so like you're learning from sort of external sources, and then developing critical insight about the meaning of what was learned, and then this kind of experience, developing kind of real learned experience of something. So then you do that through lots and lots of learning, listening, studying, and then reflecting again and again and again, and then this meditation process after that, which is what really allows you to, take this cause, the suffering together with its cause, and to eliminate them. This then brings us back to, again, the 12 links of dependent arising, the process of suffering arising and the process of it being eliminated. So it goes both ways when you learn about the 12 links of dependent arising. So here, when we're talking about emptiness more directly, then we're really looking at the way that, the first link of ignorance being eliminated then leads to the elimination of the next link of karmic action, and then So I mean, you just going through all 12, but just kind of abbreviating. So the first, eliminating the ignorance, leads to the elimination of the action, and then leads to the elimination of the consciousness, and so on throughout the 12. So that's all depending on this view of emptiness. That's depending on the view of emptiness that you can eliminate all the 12 links. And when you think about suffering and the source of suffering more extensive or more kind of directly, then that's when you're going so we talk about the 12 links in two directions, right? There's the 12 links sort of in the forward motion, and then the 12 links in reverse motion. So the forward motion is how, the first link leads to the second link, leads to the third link, and so on. So that's when you're thinking about suffering and its cause, and you really give rise to this definitive, clear knowledge in your mind about it, a doubt-free understanding about suffering and its origin. Then you're kind of meditating on or understanding the forward motion of the 12 links. Here, when we're talking about emptiness more directly, and you think about that, the kind of a sign, I guess you could say, a sign of your understanding of emptiness is that you have a good understanding of the reverse motion of the 12 links. So that's, again, seeing that by eliminating the first link of ignorance, you eliminate the second link, you eliminate the third link, and so on. So that's more directly connected with understanding of emptiness, the reverse motion. And so then again, what does that lead to at the end? Well, that leads to this, what was talked about a couple paragraphs above, this the object that we seek to attain, the reality that you seek to attain, the dharmakaya, the embodiment of truth, which again is this complete abandonment of the self. I'll just read the exact phrasing. So the total extinction of conceptions of both the self and that which belong to the self, along with the appearance as though they were reality itself, and along with the latent predispositions for such false appearances. So that's all abandoned by this view of emptiness.
테코나니 마인기 수연장 지시 존재라 소바다 테코나니 마인시도 집안놈라 테코나니 넘바놈과 이나서디 다디 제가 드시죠. 어두치도 다든다 디기 가서는 다 저름지기 드니 가서는 반대다 와차고 드니 시사 와 시사기 숑디 쿵장이 다 되게 공도 숨겨들어라. 그래서니 다 시사기 숑이 된다디 근데 우마 시세스는 다 반대다 와차고 자와시라고 제와기 시세스는 지거와 보다 시사기 드니 뭐 디기 나라다 디갈 수는 가디 뉴모바 남당스 뉴모바 남당 그 뉴모바라 때문에 중교 니바 레 와다 레 레당 레라 때문에 중교 그 류인나바 나소지여와 류인나바 나소 다 된다외더니 레디 제법으니 지 강사 나도 신제 바 여러와 되게 용하게 두분 넘디 탐제 다 노르수드는 그 뉴모바 이날에 뉴모바 되게 때문에 레상이 강사 이날에 사비 그니 사에 레나레 레디 지구는 강가 태권이 많이 있으리 아니 랑싱기 주비 태권이 말해 와 유튜브도 주반 태권이 주비 랑싱이 말해 스타르와 근데 그럼 랑싱 말해 마인장 아니 나랑도 집어 수수 끼고 넘어갔다 돈이 뭐도 강사라 그러지 섬 고스나 지시 존재다 아니 태권이 많이 신도 랑싱기 주반 다 그러다 tum durung 두바 지어와 다든다디 탄주를 시어랑시 두고 다디 많이 신도 오늘 배 딘데지 두바지 넘고리 스펜더 티시 존재 배자와와 다든다 티시 존재는 딘데지 송고리 가스는 다 티사스게 한지 심징을 지어와 다 튼족이다 총재 다 카프리카브다 딩서 통일은 다 딘데 안데 배사자 동바들라 거의 총재 배 친구들이 봐 티시 존재로 파동 라바 창가지도 매죠 어떤 딘데기다 그런 추능들의 티시 존재들이 가사가 시기들이 통해되는 거. 딘데기 아니 통전 응라서 통내 라발 라야면 옆에는 응라서다 오늘 왔다 배나 댕마라서디 자도와르기 담모디데 대연들이 응라서 바다도 차상 통되게 봐주 배를 따도 주니 야마도 코드다 코 자도와르 되게더니 냥딘데 주마친 되게든 주바 때니 콜라바 오늘 많이 맞어라. 또 혹됐다도 오늘 요바 잡지. 와 딘낭신치를 다 간다고 추낭용의 망부지들이 레고와 파다도 오늘 독사마직 배는 타바 찾아지 근데 배자와와 타바 찾아 사블라마를 얘기라 타바 찾아지 무슨 샤르도 다짜이지라 샤르도 가서 미도 참여로데 대 주의지 독선 혹대 신한 게임으로 왔던 것이라 다 지도 신한 게임도 가르려 봐래 파게 주문의 독사마래 선로 땅을 파겠다도 주문의 개요 말아 타바 찾아지 총을 봐 상무도 코르데 딘데지 코른 거라 오늘 마주장 오늘 나와죠 딘나시시네 아니 가라서 돈이 뭐도 비 강사는 돌아요 아니 가스나 어떤 유모바이나를 레나 레기랑비다 최디 탐지 아니 장신이 좀 많이 나요 가라서 뒤따도 장신 좀 나고 증거를 디 아니 다 딘데와디 제 당나에도 가가 로 추박이 발레바 바시레 스페너티스 존재기 나도 다나시레 미딘비페 통네 아니 디마티시디 교용도
So now we have a quote coming from Pelden Dawachakwa or Chandakirti, and this is from the text called The Clear Words, which is a commentary on the Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way. Question: you say that all of these afflictions, karma, bodies, agents, and effects are not reality. Still, though they are not reality, they appear to the childish in the guise of reality, like a phantom city and so forth. If this is so, then what is reality? And how do you enter that reality? So then we have this Tsongkhapa again using a source, he's bringing this in as a source for his explanation. And so it's talking about how all these different kinds of phenomena, whether you're talking about the causes of suffering, the afflictions, so you're talking about how they, the karma, which arises in dependence upon them, the actions, so it says afflictions, karma, we're talking about what results in dependence upon the karma is the bodies, as a sentient being that, was born with a body, living being, and then, the agents, the people who, the beings or people who do things, and the effects. So all of those things are not reality. They're not reality in that they are not established within nature. They appear to be established within nature or established inherently. They appear to be things which can set themselves up. They appear to be things which are self-contained, but they are not that way. They're not established that way. So then there's an example given. So we talk about, they appear to the childish in the guise of reality. So they, appear so, in this way that is like a phantom city. And so a phantom city is the kind of example of like if there's a big empty kind of a big, open empty space, and someone has the kind of hallucination of this giant city, but they go to touch it and go to go try to walk into the city, I guess, or touch the city, and then there's nothing there. You can't grasp anything there. So it's basically a hallucination. And there are other examples like this, like the so then there's another example of like an illusionist, a kind of skilled illusionist who creates this illusion of there being horses and elephants and the kind of show, right? Creates a show for an audience, but where there really isn't any. So there's no horse there, no elephant there, but it appears that those things are there. So another kind of mistaken appearance. And then there's an analogy, the example of if someone sees a modeled rope, or I guess you could say a striped rope or something. So something like a striped rope that's coiled up in the dark. Someone sees it and apprehends it to be a snake. They confuse it for a snake, and then they get scared. So they actually have fear. But where does the fear come from? Well, it comes from the appearance of the rope as a snake. It comes from apprehending the rope to be a snake. So there's not actually any snake there, but still the fear comes because of that mistaken apprehension, that mistaken mind. So it's because they believed it to be true, that the appearance really, that there really was a snake there, and that they had fear. So then we have, again, whatever kind of any phenomenon. So whether we're talking about karma, afflictions, etc., for all phenomenon, they appear to exist inherently, and we grasp them to exist inherently, whereas they are not that way. So then for today, we can leave the teaching there, and if there are questions, then we can have some time for question and answer.
You can go ahead.
Yes, I had a question about, you talked about that first paragraph, and you said that it kind of had 3 parts. And I just wanted a clarification, because I thought I heard you say that the self-grasping is what leads to the appearance of something existing from its own side. And the reason I'm asking this is because I understood that the appearance is actually something that will exist even if you have a realization of emptiness, just as the illusionist will see the horse and elephant even though he knows that it doesn't exist.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to just review the notes to see what I said, and could of course be that in the something got lost in translation, of course, but anyway, I'll just ask for the clarification.
I may have just misheard as well. So.
Okay, I'll just ask.
Thank you.
That Geshe get that's all that Geshe can dang dira chinan giche not about the economy, my nation, the economy, no one. Then they Geshe can be Tambo, Dagiwar, Zimba, Ke, Ni Dila Dene, Dagdun Nongwa Dong, Dagdun we know Kegibis, Tambo, Tambo, Zimba, Kewa Dong, Dijela, Dila Dene, no one the Kegibis. Gansan Kazi D, the day Yana, then he Bernard Kumakengi, Kengi Bedi no longer, Berna, Chi, the Tombani, Dona Young, that don't temper Nongiroas, Taku Nongiroas, and a Gumakengi, Chi, Gumaken Karangi, and he Talas over, that's all, Maber Toshindu. Tadung Nongiroas, Chesang Nongwadi, and it's Zimbala Tenik, and let's get it, right?
Zibala didn't know the Kigor in a Noah the Kivar Zibala Tehomaris, Benat in the Diorwa, Terlai Hanaris, Pena, Kuma Kendigirwa, Korang Nabanazuton, Korang Nawa the Yorde, Zibadi Yomarwa, Nawa Yura Zimbabwe in the Tisharwa. Tatamudagan Nawa the Zibandiga Chumarwa, Tamudagan the Zimbadi Latini, and you couldn't send the Nawa the Shaderwa. The Indusani Nawa than Zimbani, and around the same Tamu Zimbadi, you are Tamu because that Zimbadi Dinima Mevas Zimbadi Nibotin Tony Castle Zimbadi Zimanash Chubarish some down that Zimbadi Ma Shomedi and Zimbadi Mena and Zimbadi Pasha the Toki, non the warriors, Nawa the unit. Omatoji and Nawa the Yola Zimbadi never to go nearby your mares. Tinda Dipagi Pejawamadu. Dancing down what Dadu to what's Zimba, Dadu Nawani, Dadu Zimbadi, near a level is Mebanana, Tony Mato, we cancer, Giva Tom Meban, Tunang to Dadu to Batsi, Zimbi Pasha, Tokitini, Yabe, Lamgaria, Tobolina, did not what they go, Sajiba Batua, Condas Sajiba Gua, Cosana Chance, Papala, the Debatua, no, what you should they were. What did you do? Near Tajuma and dancing Panga, the Debatua, no, what you worry. 주저 가시나 응아를 진비 진바디 도기와 마도지기 강가라 지고 말했어. 와디 나와디 여바라 진바디 예바도 오도 줘야 차고에서 남나 디차고 말했어. 와다 거기 베나다기 인다디 주마 쳔보디 딤바 달랑주 진바 요마데 디문에 레스미 사무도 요마데나 나와디 요레. 와디 tinjodi 가서 tin다디 미딘비 빼라 샤워르도 나와도 진바 계단이 빼라 샤면 디로와. 다들 당신 당주 베트코랑 당신 등님마 유비 또기 다야스 람통불림이 자주 고모통나요 나와디 되고 그래서 당신이 파셔게 또기 그와 변하고 빼디죠 고발아요 고발룩서 뉴지로와 고바디 파 메와 sönen 뉴드라 치만다 고비치면 되네요 티가서 고비 또기 중요하디 디나지신 당신면에 당신이 파셔게 또기 다들 나와디 배야 자주 고통나요 되고 그래서 어떤 뒤부터 그래서 지난 강가라 대번 뒤짐바라 나와도 우두기 찹스고 말레스 그와 다도 두바들아 다르래 다도 두바지 나와딘 중하라 다도 두바지 뭐지 우두 녀버도 좋아래 뒤도 비든 나와도 슈친 슈리레베디 괜찮지레스 어떻게
So it's like this. It's so in sort of what you're saying about that there can be the appearance of, you know, the self, the appearance of things appearing as self, while there isn't in a particular person's mind the grasping of things as the grasping which grasps things that sorry, okay, let me start over. Okay, so the appearance it's funny because appearance is like a noun, a verb in Tibetan. Okay, so the appearance of things appearing as self can be in someone's mind without there being grasping which grasps things as self. But it's still the case that the appearance of things appearing as self arises from the grasping which grasps things as self. So why is that? It's because this is talking about for ordinary beings, especially specifically where, this first we have this grasping of this grasps things as self that comes from beginningless lifetimes, and it's because of the pattern or habit of grasping for so long that then there's imprints, and the imprints that give rise to that appearance of things appearing as self. So it's like that. So then, and that even explains why how you do have even the high bodhisattvas who have eliminated, like on the 8th ground and higher, or the arhats, who are the people who have eliminated the grasping which grasps things as self. They still have the appearance of things appearing as self. So there's still that appearance because it's from the imprints. So those imprints were laid by the grasping at the self, grasping which grasps things as self. And so if you ask, is it definite, or is there pervasion that if there is the presence of the appearance of things appearing as self, then they're necessarily grasping which grasps self? Then no, there's no pervasion. It's not absolutely necessary in all cases that the grasping be present when the appearance is present. So that's like the example you gave. And the example of the illusionist or the magician creating this illusion, the illusionist himself or herself sees that, knows that, yes, the horses and so forth don't exist, so does not have the grasping at them existing, but they still appear to that, to the illusionist themselves. And so that is true, like in that case. But this example there really, it's not for the sake of kind of explaining, or the example isn't specifically meant to explain the order of arising of those two, the appearance and the grasping. It's meant to explain the three different kinds of people in relation to whether they have the appearance or grasping or not. So then there's another example given, which is the garlic. So we talk about the obstructions to omniscience, the cognitive obscurations. And so those are sort of like the smell left behind. If you have a container, you have a, I guess a jar that you put garlic in, some container, and then you remove the garlic, but there's still the smell left over even after you've removed the garlic. So that's sort of showing how this appearance of things appearing as self, that even occurs for like the arhats and the 8th ground bodhisattvas and so on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's very clear.
So there's a written question. Oh yes, please go.
Someone asks, can you elaborate or explain in a few or more steps the 12 points of dependent origination in reverse? Is this done to gain an understanding of emptiness? How does this work? And can you help show us how it eliminates the links in reverse motion? How it is eliminating the links in reverse motion?
Younger Geshe general now look doggy remember the some tangna jangna some tangna then taran tony toy pengity base tony tola pengity base any that's so country
or did la junior da luchung is bachi dang lukto is bani da luchung is bachi samen 동해 때마다 군주들이 방금 뒤에서 못한 거지. 와. 룩도가 지금 손대 때니 남대당 고된 게 좀 뒤리고. 다 가서는 당 가서는 예라 당 말이 봐 지다디 가발라 때니 니바 뒤실에 가사래. 사면디 다 가해디 가리 예라 당 말이 봐 가게 니보디 동료도 로디 예바도 고와디 랑싱기 섬무지 티나를 되게 와 지다디 다 지다디 가발라 때니 니바 뒤실에 당으로 줄래 개와사고 미개와사고 레 노바나서 사야기 단디 레들라테네 테네 지부 나바나서 오지 용해들라테네 지부 텐데 다 지라테네 에라 주니 고셰저는 규이 텐데가다 지부 텐데 dünyası var. 규이 텐데 에라 주니들 규이 개왕나마 인제라 되네 가스나 된데 나 그거 아니 개와 딜라드는 된데 되는데 거 뭐 개와니 예수님과 시치리 되네 받들와 다 교회 된데가디 메나 개 체득이 아니 개비 된데 예수님과 시기 된데 받들고 된데 용어 다디 용문도 삼무디 땅에들라 아니 동네나 반나서도 매와 샤야들 개 가리섬 땅도 무슨 규디 된데 매와 좀 규디 된데 자와디 직다 말이 바로와 다 말이 비도디 추바레샤 선의 삼무 땅에들라 다른 삼무들 삼무 땅에 고백 통해서 슈치는 거 가슴다 동네나 반는 세대기 동네나 반나서 지어와 다 뒷낭신신이 알아서 다 개와가지 개된비는 다 개와 망보지라 다 동네나 반나서 뒷낭신 용사를 다른 비는 세들 그냥 알아서 로 쉐쉐니 야야야 존내 다마다 배 경고 찾아보더라 테니까 동네나 반나서 지게 두스는 꼬라 좀 두고 두조 강가 아니 개와가만이 다 나는 레기 뉴바지 떼사버려 다 개왕아마기 레기 뉴바지라 때네 대단 동안나 반나서 주고 동안나 반나서 고해들 개왕아미기 되니 내가 뉴모디 중앙 나시 개와 치마래 동안나 반나서 용해들라 아니 가서 딜라든다 집들지 용도 지다지 다 지다되게 춘한디 그 추바 바시레샤 삼삼로 땅땅땅땅땅인데 아니 다 가서 때내라 주니 독이 섬들이 에라 당국이 말이 가바라 때네 교회는 이번 두제랄까 되는 말 가발 텐데 다시 마시는 때내라 주니 다시 바신도 가야기 섬로 땅인데 다 뒤섬로 땅에 자와디 가발리고 지다 가야 되라 지다 가야 되라 지다디 추바이마 지다 추바이마데 섬로 갈당 우리 지다기 수능이 아니 뭐 장신 두바 징게 나 장신 마두바를 두바레샤 섬로 땅에 되라 근데 장신 마두바디 이미 윤센들라 되니 가스는 말아서 동료 공경이 다 내시여와 가셔니 비즈니스 가정이 공지자이바 아니 캬바니 비즈니스 지도로다 tun속이 상무지도 무슨 맨날 메탐 메바지라 되는 다른 말아서 무슨 가로 이제처럼 두고래스 와 뭐다야 티 루도기 상무되게 되니 뭐 코에기 네바디 네발라 동력이 코어디 메바면은 얘라도 말이바 얘랑 당 말이바 가발한테 니바 두실데 각 세저와 가액이 지마디다 서뭐 콜투월데 딜라 때네 돈이라 네번 쳐도 그래서 돈이 돈에 네번 고고도 돈이 돈은 마도는 뒤로서 말해 가에서는 돈이 돈은 지다 나도도 지다기 니바 중도 지다 니바 돈은 지다라 때네 중이 동안 나만나 수도 네바 고도 섬이더니 섬을래는데 다루도 섬들이 오르와 그래서 다 동안 나만나 수도 되고 말와 메디완사다 동안 나만나 수도 되고 아니 티 아니 지다디랑 신이 내가 소에 탑시 치고도 선데 돈이도 시럽디 맨날 직사말 섬모들하더니 말아도 이제 치고도 그래서 티 이제 은하는 가르치기를 다때 고메라 하나도 전환리로 와 어떤 대신에 변도는 거래서 어디를 시켰다.
So then when we talk about the 12 links going in the forward order, forward motion, then that's in light of reflection on the first two truths, the noble truths of suffering and its origin. And when we, or really the origin and suffering, because it starts with the origin. And then when we think about going in reverse order, then that's thinking about the second two truths, the cessation and the path. And so why is that? Well, we can think about, what is it? So first of all, let's divide up the 12 links. And so, okay, so first of all, you see that, right, when you get to this root, the first of the 12 links is the root of all the suffering. And so that's the ignorance. So by eliminating the ignorance, then you eliminate the second link. By eliminating the second link, you eliminate the third link, so on. So you eliminate the cause and then the results get eliminated. And so we have the cause out of the cause and result. If we divide them up, there's 5 of the 12 links, which are causes, and 6 and 7, which are results. And meaning in this context, what we mean is 5 which were already created in a previous lifetime, and then the 7 resultant ones are experienced in this lifetime. And so we look at the ignorance, which is the first link, right? And we can identify it as being a mistaken mind. We really get that kind of clear understanding that we can identify this is a mistaken mind. And so then, so we're just kind of explaining like how this way of thinking about the reverse order, relates to meditation and emptiness, which is what the question's about. So you get this understanding that that first link is a mistaken mind itself, and then you start to reflect on the rest of the 12 links, and you see the resultant ones in this life, all these different kinds of suffering, right? We have, birth, aging, sickness, death, and all these different kinds of suffering that are there in the 12 links and that we experience in this life. And we realize that, well, just like, these in this life were caused from previous lives, and likewise in future lives, we're going to have to experience all these different kinds of suffering. So all throughout your whole life, day in and day out, you experience a wide variety of different kinds of suffering. So we have this experience, and then we realize we're going to have to continue experiencing this in future lives. And so then that brings us to, look at and see, well, what's the way to reverse that? And so you see that, again, this root of ignorance, that's a mistaken appearance. That's a false mistaken appearance. And so it comes down to seeing how that this whole process of everything I don't want, the suffering that I don't want and experience continuously, it all comes back to this view of the perishing aggregates. Okay. And so since it's there in the view of the perishing aggregates, then you see how, that very view is mistaken. Seeing that very view is a mistaken appearance or a hallucination, if you will, then what you're really understanding is that this way that it apprehends phenomena to have a nature doesn't exist. The nature that it apprehends doesn't exist. The inherent existence it apprehends doesn't exist. So that's the view of emptiness. That's the wisdom realizing emptiness. So you come to that recognition, you come to that realization or that view through the various meditation practices. So like the one that we discussed at the last class of the end of the season in 2021, which was the four, what's called like the 4 essential points of meditation and emptiness. So there's ascertaining the ascertaining the object to be negated is the first one. Then ascertaining the pervasion is the second one. Ascertaining that there's not a truly, the self is not truly one, and then or one with the aggregates, and then ascertaining that the self is not truly different from the aggregates. So that's the 4 essential points of emptiness meditation. So through meditations like that, then you come to this view. And so that was explained a little briefly before. And so you see that, so this is all how, by meditating in this way on emptiness and coming to see it, coming to see this ignorance as the source of all the other parts of the 12 links, and then seeing that it's a mistaken mind. So then you realize that by seeing that the object it grasps, this self, this nature doesn't exist, then you are meditating on emptiness, and so it's you get this greater and greater confidence or greater and greater faith, and kind of like you could say like almost you just get the taste of emptiness, and you get a liking for wanting to meditate on it more, so that you see how that's going to really reverse this whole process of the 12 links. Okay, no more questions, then we'll stop here.
Shabe sede pado denjo je kaden du je kamzu chile ju to jo da lo ke lo se na ma ri lo de me de lam de je ve je ge sho de sho chang ju sim ju ri mo che ma ke pa na ke wa nya ba me ba ya ko ne ko do pe wa sho ke wa di ke wo ku so na me shi so Sonome Geshe le Jungwe Tamba Kuni Toba Shu